Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah. So we have 3 presentations for you today. I'm chairing the session. My name's Jan Thompson, and I'm Senior Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa in Defence, Justice and Public Safety for Oracle. Today we have presentations from James Winterbottom, Sebastian Stepfer and Thomas Baun. I don't know if Asger Plæhn is in that presentation as well, but I'm sure we'll still soon find out. James is presenting from PEMEA, Support Enterprise Emergency Calling. And he's a Chief Architect and Product Manager for Emergency Solutions at Deveryware. And I'm just about to hand the microphone across to him. James will manage your questions during his session. There may be a little bit of time at the end of the 3 sessions as well for you to talk. So over to you, James. Thank you.
Right. So does that actually work? Okay, cool. And I've got a forward button and a backward button, even better. Hi. So today I'm going to talk to you about PEMEA supporting enterprise emergency calling and why enterprises have emergency calling issues and just what PEMEA is going to do to help alleviate some of that. So if we look back as to why we actually have telephone numbers, we have telephone numbers because that was an easy way to represent certain things on switches and to identify switches. So if you dialed a telephone number, you pick up your phone and the local exchange would go tick, 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 tick until it found your particular contact set. And then you would dial and the switch would go chunk, 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 chunk until it found a free contact, and it would jump on, then select a link to the next switch, to the next switch, to the next switch until it got to its destination. And hanging off the other end of that switch was a pair of wires that ran out into the street into someone's house. So your telephone number equaled your location. That was all pretty good and easy, wasn't it? Well, let's fast forward a little bit, because then we have the wired world of yesteryear. So people worked in offices, and they were open-planned offices. There was a phone everywhere. There were phones in every house, phones on every office phones on every desk in every office, and in every government building. And all of those wires led back to a local telephone exchange, and the local telephone exchange linked to a wider trunk network that linked cities, towns, buildings, to let people communicate. And it also, part of that was providing access to the emergency services. So let's fast forward to 2010 to kind of 2015, and phones are mostly gone off the desks at this point. They're still in some places like conference rooms or in managers or desks and reception and service desks and things like that. All staffs have are computers and mobile phones. Conference call systems like WebEx and GoToMeeting, those sorts of things were starting to become a lot more prevalent. And you started to see the early appearance of these kinds of enterprise communication services. So, there was Slack and Skype for Business. But communications and computers were still largely separate. So you had a phone for talking and you had a laptop for working. And if people were mobile, if people needed to move around, you gave them a laptop. So what happened? Phones used to route by numbers, but then we ended up with super fast internet access. And once we got super fast internet access, we started to see personal apps and enterprise apps start to communicate and become the primary means of communication. So what we know about internet apps is they don't use numbers. They use domain names. So you have the person whose name it is that you want to contact at a particular domain name, and hey presto, then you can talk to them. So it's a completely different way of thinking to the traditional numbers that we had that went switch, 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 switch in order to get to where they were going. So let's go forward from 2015 to 2020, which is where we are now. And we now have properly integrated communication platforms. So pretty much everybody, certainly everybody here, unless they're using the domestic Wi-Fi around here, has got fast internet connections. And all of those connections are over IP. And communication has now moved almost 100% into the computer. So audio, video calling across enterprises, you've got chat, you've got screen and file sharing, you've got calls going from the PSTN and going to and from the PSTN via specific PBX gateways. Communication occurs across different enterprises. So we've got federated communication systems now, with almost no need to the PSTN except where you've got to focus on someone that's not actually inside the federated enterprise environment that you're trying to contact. And these are very big networks. If we look at Teams last year in December, they had 270 million active users in December last year. So we're not talking about little enterprises or little networks anymore. We're talking about large, global scale networks that don't touch the PSTN. So these solutions will work anywhere where there's internet. They're able to work in any office, able to work from home, able to work, and many companies have basically survived COVID as a result of these sorts of communication applications. So they can provide all of your communication needs, almost. So, apps calling over the internet have a source location and a destination, but they don't actually care about either of those. They just need to know where the device is, how to contact the device logically. So location and device type don't matter for applications anymore. So what do we actually need in order to be able to make an emergency call? Well, we need to be able to detect the fact that somebody wants to make an emergency call. That's kind of important. We need to know where the caller is once we've detected that they want to make an emergency call. And finally, we need to know how that location relates to a particular PSAP. So which is the right PSAP to go to for that emergency call? Okay, something's gone a jammy there. So those are the things that we need in order to be able to create an emergency call. So enterprise emergency calling services or access, here we've got a building and we've got an enterprise network and we've got a PSTN to a PSAP. So we have an incoming emergency call. We can detect it. We can do some magical, messy location stuff within the enterprise to actually work out where the caller is. Then from that, we can know the right PSAP because you're calling from a particular office, and that can go through then to the correct PSAP with the location information, and everybody is happy, the person gets help. So what happens if you're calling from home? Well, if you're calling from home, we can detect the fact that it's an emergency call because we're going through the same system that we were going through before. However, the in-office messy location stuff can't actually work out where the caller is. So this is a bit of a problem. We want it to go to a PSAP, but we want it to go to the PSAP where the user is, where they're at home. And unfortunately, in this case, we don't know where that is. So guess what? It's going to go to the office PSAP, and what we really wanted it to do was to go to the PSAP at the other end. So in COVID, what we found is that a huge number of people aren't working in offices anymore. They're working from home. So this kind of solution has got problems with it when it comes to that. So what are our options for this? Well, we can put in third-party providers so that they can take care of it all, and you just say, here's an emergency call, go off and handle it. They tend to be quite expensive. Because of the way the emergency services work, they're different from country to country. So if you're a global enterprise, that's a problem because you've got to manage it differently in every single place. And they might not always work in every situation anyway. So don't make calls from home. Well, that solves the problem, doesn't it? Unless, of course, you need some help. Don't worry about it at all. Well, there's actually a regulatory requirement for that in Europe, so that's a bit of a problem. Best effort. Let's use what we've got now. Or we could use PEMEA, and that will help us address this problem completely. So let's have a little bit of a look at what PEMEA does and how it solves things. So PEMEA's roots come from being able to allow apps to roam and to take their features with them as they roam so that those features also roam. We use all web technologies. We are an ETSI standard with TS 103478. We can support multi-party multimedia. We've got very strong security because that was built into it from the ground up. And because of that, we've got GDPR conformance, and we've got a formal statement that's out there in terms of how PEMEA conforms to GDPR. We're built specifically for applications. And as we've just said, these are all enterprise applications for communication. So we can work for enterprise apps, and we can work for apps with disabilities. And ultimately, we have a stateless routing mechanism so that what we end up with at the end of all of this is a peer-to-peer communication solution. So, enterprise integrated PEMEA. 4 very easy steps. Step 1, detect an emergency call. Well, we can do that. We do that no differently than anybody else would. Next, we discover whether or not PEMEA works for this area. So we have a specification currently going through ETSI, which we hope will be a standard later this year or early next year, which will allow you to determine whether or not the PEMEA services that you want to be able to use are actually active in the area that you are now. So we can do that. We can actually determine then whether or not PEMEA will work for you. Next, decide whether or not you should use the PEMEA network to make this call, subject to whether or not it's available, or whether or not you should have the status quo. So the worst case that you've got is status quo, and the best case you've got, which is increasing as the number of PEMEA deployments goes up, is this new solution where your call will actually go to the correct PSAP based on where you are. So we've discovered and then we've initiated. So how does this work if you're working from home? We just looked at from working from the office. So working from home, surprisingly enough, is exactly the same. So we detect the emergency call because it's going to go through the enterprise environment. We decide or determine, discover whether or not PEMEA is going to work in that particular location. And then we can, from that, we can decide whether or not we're going to make that PEMEA call or whether or not we're going to go through the status quo solution, and we can then initiate the call to the appropriate PSAP. So, who benefits from all of this? Well, enterprises, disabilities, disability community, people in general, and PSAPs. And they all win if we put in a PEMEA-based solution. Why? Enterprise benefits because we get reduction in cost and complexity. The current location solutions that they put in place for enterprise are complex, and they're difficult to negotiate, and they spend a lot of money trying to make all of those solutions work, and they still often get things wrong. And when you get things wrong in an emergency, it's not such great news. All these apps use WebRTC to communicate. Guess what? PEMEA is using WebRTC to communicate with the PSAP. And if you were in any of the sessions this morning, you'd have seen that the endpoints were talking PSAP, and the call takers were the endpoints were talking WebRTC, and the call takers were talking WebRTC. So this is WebRTC all the way through. And we can support both the workers in the office and the workers at home in exactly the same way. So our staff can now be mobile, work from home if that's the safest place for them to be, or to work from other places wherever they happen to need to be. So PSAPs benefit because they can get fast deployment and it's easy to expand. So PEMEA can really be deployed very quickly. If you go to stand 18, I think it is, we can give you some indications as to just how quickly some of those deployments have occurred. It's cost effective and flexible. So what we found is that compared to some of the other solutions, we're operating in the kind of 10 to 30% range. Emergency call control is in the PSAP's hands. It's reliable, and we've deployed that in high availability solutions now, and we've got that deployed currently. And we use current communication mechanisms. So basically, all the apps you've got in your pocket on your phone or on your laptop, they're all using WebRTC and HTML5. PEMEA is all based around HTML5 and WebRTC and those technologies. And we can make it interwork with legacy, so we have got some standards that can work with that. Disability benefits. Well, for those people that were here in October or in Riga in October, you'd have seen a presentation that I put together around that. So we can support video, instant messaging, chat, RTT, and they work anywhere and they roam, and they provide that equal access component, which is so important and is now actually mandated as part of the EC Universal Service Directive. So People benefit. They get to use things the way they communicate today. It's secure, it's multi-platform, can support file sharing, public alerts, and a whole bunch of other things. So the reality is that this solution can address the current enterprise solution problems that we've got, and it can do that whilst not causing them a huge amount of pain. And so if you want to learn a bit more about PEMEA, there's the PEMEA Consortium that will, if you go and visit that webpage, that will give you a whole lot more information about PEMEA, or you can come and talk to us at Deveryware at Stand 18. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for a great presentation. Does anybody have any questions for James about that presentation?
Number one question is the location-wise. So that's an enterprise setting, right?
Yep.
So there are multiple offices, and the employee calls the emergency number. So how accurate is the location? Is it you map every single WebRTC ID to a location, like the floor or the office number? That's one. Second, so is there any number to be dialed, or what's the UI for the employees to call? It's because it's not a number, because you said it's WebRTC, right?
Okay, so in answer to your first question, I'm going to assume that you're referring to what happens in the enterprise environment today. So assuming that that is the case, the devices can go off and they can query various things in the network to get locations. So you've heard about a LIS. Well, the LIS was actually originally intended to be an edge or access network unit, and that there are discovery protocols in place for that. And I know that a number of enterprise solutions actually do go through and they use things like wire map tracing and things like that within the network to get the accurate civic location. And then that is provided from the client at call time when you make an emergency call. So there is actually an emergency call access button on those apps if the enterprise that you've gone through has enabled outbound PSTN calling. So that's the answer to your first question. So if it's going out through that mechanism in terms of emergency, that location is just simply tied back to your number. In the PEMEA case, your number is actually used as an outbound identifier, and the location gets transmitted with that through the PEMEA network, and that's actually used to route to get to the correct PSAP. So you actually have a direct linkage at that point. Does that help?
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you very much, James.
Yep.
Perhaps you gents could pick that up after the session.
Sure.
And we can move on to the next presentation.
Cool.
Round of
Thank you very
applause
much.
for James. Thank you very much. And our next presenter is Sebastian Stepfer, who will be presenting on mobile apps for public safety. And Sebastian is partner managing director of IPS Consultants. Welcome.
Good afternoon. So, thank you, James. I believe you were somehow the best possible intro to my presentation, and I will come later, talk later why you are the perfect intro for my presentation. So, my background is from International Public Safety. International Public Safety is a boutique consultancy company. We are specialized in consulting in the public safety sector, focusing on technology, strategy, and project execution. So this has little to do, or maybe to some extent only to do with mobile apps, but IPS has founded a small new company, a startup company, to be in the business of mobile apps for public safety. The area we are focusing is different what you heard from James. James was focusing very much on the inbound flow. So let's say a citizen try to get help from a PSAP, and we focusing on the other side. We focusing on the outbound, how to communicate with the public safety resources, helping the person calling the PSAP. So we focusing on the outbound part, and we don't do consumer public safety apps for people trying to call the PSAP. So we focus on the other side on managing resources. So the next slide, I'm using this slide since quite a while, and sometimes I think it's maybe not 100% accurate anymore. This maybe was the situation a couple of years ago, so that you have basically two streams in communication. So the PMR world with the still handheld radios, where a Tetra radio is considered a modern device. And you have the consumer world with, let me say, the smartphone used in this area, which are compared to the Tetra world. At this point in time, the Tetra, it's more or less a smartphone is a supercomputer compared to a Tetra device. So, but this has already changed a little bit. I have to talk today to a project manager from a large federal police in Germany today, and they have rolled out 30,000 smartphones to their police force, and they use heavily these smartphones in parallel with what they use in terms of voice, radio, and Tetra devices. And I was told that, let me say, a lot of especially younger police officers use these apps which come with these devices rolled out to the police force quite a lot. Because so this means before they pick the radio, they simply pull out the smartphone. So as a summary, smartphones and apps is basically the same thing. So without the app, a smartphone would not be smart at all. So today we see that more or less everybody, and I would guess with a very high percentage that more or less everybody of you carries a smartphone this day. And this is also the same thing for public safety personnel in the field. They all carry smartphones. And the thing which makes the smartphone smart, enables the smartphone do something interesting are obviously the apps. And there's a good reason why in the consumer world there are basically millions of apps available doing a lot of little things which are very helpful for the user of these devices. The network itself is simply a transport mechanism for providing or delivering data fast and secure from one, let me say, endpoint to the other endpoint. The other thing which is important is we believe, and this is one reason why we created this new company being in this business, that the app business works very different than classic software system business in the public safety environment. So if you talk about today a CAT project, for example, you talk about a project size of maybe a couple of million euros. You talk about a project duration of maybe a year or two, maybe even much longer. This is very different in the app world. So you don't talk about large solution projects, you talk about products. They are relatively small, they are relatively, I would say, the price per unit is relatively low, and you simply want to get this app, configure it somehow, use it, and you talk about, let me say, a duration to put it into place of maximum of a couple of months. So very different type of business requires a different approach, and let me say also different business models. Yeah, but nevertheless, there is the public safety apps, or let me say mission-critical apps used in mission-critical environments have special requirements, and I have tried to summarize these requirements in the sentence that they must be very reliable for being used in mission-critical environments. They must be very secure. This means data must be protected all the time. And they must be easy to use because public safety personnel works under stress, in stress environments and need to be or having some user interfaces which are very intuitive so that they can focus on their real tasks and don't need to focus on technology. So in order to do so, in order to address all these issues, what we believe is important for outbound public safety apps, we have created a toolbox to create such apps by configuration. So most of the apps you see today are simply developed by app development software companies. And they do a lot of them, and these are one-off things, and they create many of them, and some of them are done in, let me say, in high-cost countries. A lot of them are done offshore. We have believe that the right approach in the public safety arena for mobile apps is create apps by configuration using a toolbox which you can use all the time. So our toolbox includes a framework which basically is the part of it which is provides the services on the server side, on the backend side, and the engine. And the engine is basically the app you load from the App Store. So the configuration gives you then your single-purpose app. This means a small functional thing to do your specific work inside of this environment, inside of the map of the app engine. So this allows finally a very efficient, fast creation of single-purpose apps, which are basically by the framework safe and secure and provide the necessary usability. So mobile apps and MOPS, mobile apps in the public safety environment have a lot of different options for usage. So first of all, these apps can be used together with enterprise systems. Enterprise system is, for example, a large CAT system or a large incident command system, which today very often have no mobile front end. So they can be connected via interfaces to such systems to work as mobile front end to this enterprise type of systems. Additionally, in small, more workgroup environments, let me say a small squad needs to have his own separate environment. It can work also as a standalone point solution. We have a series of productized, ready-to-use apps built on our framework, built on our toolbox, but also our toolbox is available for any customer or for any application developer to develop their own efficient mobile apps for public safety using these frameworks, do some custom work. So deployment can be done either through MDM, which is classic, the way you do deployment in an environment where you have, let me say, a large agency which has a large IT infrastructure, or it can be done very simple through the Apple, the Google, the Microsoft app stores. So use these app stores to deploy and to maintain your applications in the field. So this is a good approach for smaller agencies which can't afford the high overhead necessary to maintain their own devices through MDM. And obviously, the app stores are very, very efficient in maintaining apps in the field. They maintain billions of apps out there. The backend service itself can run in the cloud. Again, a good option for smaller customers which don't have the capabilities running large data centers. Or they can, of course, run on-premise. If you take a large police force which has all the data centers in place, then it can obviously be run on these particular data centers. So we have developed, based on our framework, a product portfolio. The product portfolio has 4 elements. One element is a CAT suite, everything you need around mobile apps, around the workflows which exists in the computer-aided design environment. The next suite is for large-scale event. You need to use very often incident command systems are used. So we have also a suite supporting incident command workflows where you have joint staff organizations and information flow between the joint staff organizations and the operations in the field. We have a small suite which focusing on creating called MOPS objects, which focuses on creating point of interest information, public safety specific point of interest information, collecting this information and make this information available to the field. And we have a dedicated safe and secure messenger for public safety agencies, which provides a WhatsApp type of functionality in a closed environment for public safety agencies which have requirements to have something which does not run on the open internet. So how can this look like? So this is from a form factor, a smartphone form factor. You connect to something like to a service, we call it the instance. In our case, it would be, it's called CAD demo. You enter your credentials, and you end up in the second form where you can select what type of organization will you want to work in, what type of application you want to use. In this case, it's a CAD command application. This is basically the application used by a mobile commander. Our app framework supports any form factors and any device types. So this would be the same form on a larger device, either a larger tablet or maybe even a laptop. You enter finally the application, and you have a very efficient, clear user interface. Here you see, for example, lists of incident. Or you can have, again, the form factor of a smartphone where you have, let me say, a different type of presentation of the list information. Or you can have a combined form which provides you a combined map view with key information which you have to have available working on an incident. All these devices bring their map engine with them automatically. We use the native map engines of all these devices, so you get full map enabled. So you can use this for relatively simple, straightforward webs, or you can already do some incident command mapping on these devices where you draw areas and you draw symbols. So MOPS App for Public Safety. Our apps are created by configuration and run as native apps on any device and on any form factor. They can be used standalone in a point solution, or they can work as a front end to any enterprise application in this environment. All apps are fully geospatial enabled. We support device maps, but we can also consume all map data which are available in the particular agency. For example, if there is a map service available, we can consume these map servers. All apps work on and offline, so they can store data on the device, and they are per design safe and secure. Thank you very much.
Perfect timing. That's used the slot, but there will be opportunity to ask questions on that presentation at the end of the session. So thank you very much, Sebastian. And I'd like now to introduce Thomas and Asger. I think they're both presenting. And their presentation is on SMS to video, insights and real use cases from Scandinavia, pros and cons of live video streaming in 112 calls. Over to you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, my name is Thomas, and I'm a CEO and the founder of the company Incendium. What we're going to present to you today are some pros and cons of our experience in the field. We'll run through it. We have 10 years of experience, and I'm trying to get this thing to work. Could I have some help? Spanish? Okay, yeah. Ah, thank you. Thank you very much. My colleague Asger.
Hello.
We're a Danish company, and we have those 10 years of experience. We're going to cram that into 15 minutes of speed talking, so hang on. What we've been doing for almost all that time, we've been doing live streaming. We work entirely focused on video, and it's only in the emergency sector. That's what we've been doing for 10 years now. Right now, at the peak of our existence, we have 300,000 live streams each year that go through our platform. We're going to go through this agenda, run through a little bit about motivation around EU directives. That might be a motivating factor for some of you guys to implement video in your organization. And then we're going to take the different perspectives, go through all the participants involved in a 112 call.
All right, so EU directives. This is important because we need to comply, at least if we're working in Europe. So I guess that if you are running a PSAP or working in one, you might want to pay attention to this. EU directive states that you need to comply to be able to make calls available for disabled people. So you need to be able to take more than just a phone call. You need to be able to take video as a source. It could be chat functions, or it could be other types of functions supporting a call. And what we're going to show you today is a very easy shortcut for you guys to get started with video, and we are going to take some of the perspectives as Thomas mentioned.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about is what we've learned through our decade-long time in the field, pros and cons from the caller's perspective. The pros and the cons, you can see we will have a little signature so you can see what we regard as pros and cons respectively. But a little bit of a disclaimer, of course we're going to talk from the perspective of our own platform called Incendium. And we're not going to show you a lot of slides with screenshots. You can go out there in booth number 14 and we'll be very happy to show you what it looks like.
So we're located right now in Denmark, but we have customers around the world. We would be happy to put in even further dots on this map, but it's just to mention that it's not just the Nordic countries that are using it, it's being used all over the world right now. So yeah, video calls in emergency.
So this is the route that we will take you through from the perspective of the caller to the call center and to the first responders through ambulance services, police force or firefighters.
So the caller perspective. So what we did is that we asked our customers, PSAP operators, to ask their customer, your customers, the citizens, of what their perspective was. So the facts that we are presenting right now are based on some studies that some of our customers done towards their customers. And some of the concerns that the citizens had when they were asked about video being used in emergency calls was they said, well, yeah, it sounds great, but there might be some technical issues, or will my phone support all of these new technologies? Some of them had concerned the citizens that they might incriminate themselves by showing something in their house during a video call, which wouldn't make a very good situation if they were showing the police that they actually had something inside of their house. So that was some of the concerns the citizens had when they were asked about the video calls. On the other side, when they were asked about after they tried it, was that it really helped us be calmed down using this incident. It was a life-threatening situation, and the operator, the call operator, really helped me calm down and helped me in that situation. Some of them said it really reduced the barrier I had to pronounce this difficult road sign that I was witnessing in Wales or in some other countries where I was on a vacation. And for disabled people, we have had situations where a blind person called in and was able to activate video calls, and the operator could help the blind person to actually put pressure on a wound. And this means that video can ensure that the correct help is and first aid are issued at all times. So when asked, these citizens, almost 94% of them said that it was easy to start the video. So that is the feedback we got from the callers. Some of the other things they said is it was very fast and it was very reliable. We felt safe, and they also said it was extremely easy to use. Just a few examples, and for those of you who don't speak Norwegian or Danish, these are just two examples from the newspapers in Norway and Denmark recently. Up here, the little girl, Nina, was saved, rescued by her grandparents by using video call. And on the other hand, this girl, Emma, discovered perhaps one of the most historical fires in Copenhagen the last 25, 50 years, and was able to stream video to the fire department so they could send the right response immediately for this incident.
Okay, I'm going to say a little bit about the call handler's perspective. Some of the concerns that they have is that now I've been working in this PSAP for 10 years, and I've been talking to the callers, but now I'll actually get the visual images, and that can put a psychological strain. It can be mentally very taxing suddenly to see what you've only been used to hearing. So that's one of the concerns. Another concern is, of course, now I have to change the way of work. What types of practices shall I implement now? My whole work life might be changed by this. And another concern is, will the duration of the call actually be prolonged? Now that I introduce a new technology, I might not be able to be as effective because of a longer time talking and trying out technical stuff. And that's a real concern, and the reality of it is that it will increase the duration. That's what we've seen from the statistical data that we got from Norway and Denmark, by 4%. And we have quite a substantial amount of data to base that on. So 4%, that's what should be expected. On the other hand, the positive thing is that by getting the eyes on the scene, that's what the feedback we get. Now we're suddenly able to see. This is like getting sight for the first time, because now we get the first-hand impression from the scene of the accident. And by that, gaining instant situational awareness, not relying on what the caller interprets and what I hear the caller saying. And in many, many cases, it has been proven that it will actually change the caller's sense of urgency by either increasing or decreasing the incident. We have based this, some of this is based on these 1,600 video calls where we've monitored will ambulances be cancelled or will they actually be dispatched in a situation where the caller initially might not want to dispatch the ambulance.
Yes, and what you can say is that the 4%, if you want to have that in seconds, the length of the call will increase by 20 seconds. That is in the average of the data that we measured during these calls. So it's not a lot of time that the video calls take, longer than a regular call.
And what our customers say is that getting video into the PSAP, that's a one-way ticket. There's no going back once you have it. It's a new era that starts the day you start using that.
So from the first responder perspective, so this is the fire department, this is the police officers, this is the ambulance services going out to the incident. So we asked them during this interview, and some of the concerns they had was that, yeah, but we already arrived at the scene, so why should I use the video? Is it really relevant for me because situation changed during the way? And there were some cultural resistance of using this new technology because I've been a police officer for the past 30 years. Why should I now use something as a video? So there has been some concerns in that area. On the other hand, some of the feedback that we got was that, wow, we can actually get the right resources dispatched immediately. That means a lot for tactical preparedness and getting a plan ready, and that means that the incident commander that we asked said that it gave me a better time to prepare for what to initiate when I arrive at the scene. So video call from citizens actually starts the chain of crisis management. So this means that all sectors, fire, police, and ambulance services actually can now see what's going on, have a common situational awareness, if the system are able to display and share the video across all sectors. So just a short quote. What our customer says is that it really contributes to a fast and effective first response, and that is probably the essence of some of the feedback from the first responders.
So what about the IT department? You're going to introduce something new to them, and the first response they'll come with is, okay, now we have to figure out, is this supported on our platform? Will it run on the software that we got? So that's one of the concerns that you should take into account. And they will also say, okay, now you introduce this new system, so you generate more work for us, there will be more support, and please apply some more resources for us. And we have a concern about a network. We should start working on the firewall. So there might be some resistance in the IT department for introducing a thing like this. What we've seen with our product is that it is extremely easy to implement. It can be delivered on-prem or like a software as a service hosted on servers in the EU. It's browser-based and it's got a strong API, so that means the IT guys that think a little bit ahead, we'd like to integrate this into our existing enterprise system, into our existing user database. We need a strong API so we can do that. What about when we got a new features that we would like to have implemented, or we would like to do things in a specific way? Do you have in-house development? That can be a key factor in getting the speed that you actually need to implement new features or to implement changes. That could be changes in iOS, changes in Android. We need in-house development for that, for making sure that can happen rapidly enough. And of course, it has to be secure. That goes without saying. What we actually hear from the interviews we got is that it is so super user-friendly that there is no support. There is no extra need for support on the side of the IT department.
So for the manager perspective,
Yeah, and just asking, raise your hand if any of you are managers. I don't see. Okay. But from a managerial perspective, you could be worried that now I have to make set off time for internal training. I have to be in charge of this cultural change. Everything, a thing that will make a conflict between me and my co-workers. And of course, the ever evil IT department sitting there. We don't want to implement something new like this. So that's a big concern that we met there. But then again, on the other hand, if you get a tool that specifically solves the problem but is sufficiently generic to be able to see there's a future here, we can do different types of stuff with this tool. It's subscription based, so we can get out fast if it doesn't work. We don't have to set off a big budget for the next 10 years that we have locked on this IT project. We can just cancel the subscription. And of course, we get the shortcut to actually comply with the EU directive that Asger mentioned in the beginning. We get the extra check mark on the climate, because by using video, you can be more efficient and only allocate the resources that you actually need. So you won't have to put those trucks and ambulances on the street that you don't need. So there's a real reduction here in CO2. And of course, the other side of that is that we maintain a resilient preparedness for the next incident by not shipping too many ambulances in the wrong direction. So really, these features of having video is what we hear from the customers. There's a pre-era of having video, of not having video, and then there is an after video, and they really don't want to go back. Yeah, and please come visit us at booth 14, and we can show you our software. We have a live setup here, so you can just try it out. And we're very proud that we have focused on this, so we feel we're very strong to take you into the future by using this product as well. And we are very committed to customer-driven innovation. So that's the way for us to evolve. That's in partnership with our customers. Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a great presentation. I do have a couple of comments of my own, but before that, I'll just invite Sebastian to come up the front. And if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask of Sebastian or the gents here, then please hold your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you. And if you wait until the microphone arrives, everybody will be able to hear you. So.
Hi, I'm Alex from Abu Dhabi Police. And we've also been thinking about video connectivity. And I was wondering, usually a video connectivity is on a mobile, you need a mobile data to be working. Is there an issue with, for example, if you only have very little mobile data, then this service would be maybe very expensive.
So
how is that solved?
What we always recommend is that as a PSAP operator starting with video, you should contact the local mobile operators and say SMS coming from this gateway, meaning the PSAP operator, should be white labeled within the network, so the data should not be counted when sending live video from any device. That is what we recommend. It's not always it's possible for PSAP to get that, but the actual service have 8 different video protocols that it runs through, so it always will measure the exact amount of the bandwidth available and will stream the video into the PSAP operators according to what is available to at that current mobile phone. And we have a radio medical service in Denmark, which are handling all the medical stuff for ships and offshore companies. And they use the system, and some of them are running on a satellite connection with very little bandwidth. So it is possible to get video through, even though the bandwidth is low.
So if I understand correctly, but the video stream is always set up from the user side. You send an SMS and then then it initiates from my mobile phone.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We've got another question just over here. If we could get the mic to this side of the auditorium, that would be great. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, I have two questions for Sebastian. The first question is, which organizations do you address with the apps? More police organization or more volunteer organizations? And the second question is, can you give us a pricing idea? Because consumer apps are very cheap, and how is this done for public safety apps?
Thank you for the question. Which customers are using the MOPS products? So we address both. We address enterprise type of customers. So we have two large federal polices in the German-speaking part of Europe using our applications in their workflows on premise in their environment, and we have volunteer customers using our apps with cloud infrastructure as software as a service. And from a pricing point of view, if you run on a cloud infrastructure, we try to achieve a pricing that the costs per mobile app and user is around 1 to 2 euros per user and month. So being close to what's the usual pricing in the app stores.
Thank you for answering that question, Sebastian. Does anybody have any other questions, or indeed any questions for James? We have a couple of minutes still if you'd like to ask anything. If I don't see any hands, I'm not seeing any hands. Just a comment, actually. It was interesting to me to hear about the 4% increase in call time, which of course requires 4% more resource. But you know, the note that I saw about 144 ambulances being cancelled is an example to me of how you can reinvest time into the most effective part of the chain. So that sounds like a good news story to me. I wonder, were there any, or are there any legislation things that you need to think of when deploying video? You mentioned people having contraband perhaps behind them in their living rooms. Are there any things like that you need to look out for?
Yeah, you always need to look out for legislation, especially if you're running a police PSAP. But definitely, but it varies very much from country to country. There are still not a single regulation saying this is how video can be used in all of Europe. So yes, there are local differentiations of how you can use video, how you should present video, make the caller say I'm filming to the 112 operator before they start, or there can be local legislation that needs to be taken into consideration.
And
yes.
even, Asger, if I may add, even in a small country like Denmark, there can be different interpretations of what should we actually, how should we read the EU legislation on this matter. So what we've done from the start is to build in several steps, several configurable options, so we can make it match with what the lawyers in your specific PSAP interpret the legislation to be like.
And I think it's quite interesting that this is technology and going at such a pace that legislation is having a job keeping up with something that clearly is very effective. So just a round of applause for everybody that's presented today. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And just as we wrap up, if I can just draw your attention to the next industry session is here in the same room. And in parallel track 1, we've got mental health for call takers. And in parallel track 2, we have considerations related to the war in Ukraine. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along.